This time next year, you could have a globally ranked podcast. A podcast that positions you as the industry expert and authority you are. A podcast that impacts your client retention and helps you build a robust network. A podcast that brings in additional streams of revenue, secures you speaking opportunities, and can even help you pitch your next book to a major publisher. Want to start a podcast to help your business dreams and goals come true? Join us for Podcast Launch Prep Week. From February 23rd to 27th, we are bringing you 5 days of virtual hands-on workshops, panel Q&As, and even hot seat coaching so you can plan your podcast strategy, make a launch plan, and even plan out your first 6 months of episodes to keep you off that content treadmill. If a podcast is on your to-do list for 2026, join us today at podfoxmedia.com. Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. So if you were here last week, we did part 1 at my friend Ati's mastermind with half of the people here for the mastermind. And we talked a little bit about our stories and how that shows up in like our mission and how that kind of our mission for what we do goes back to childhood. And so if you missed that, go back and check that out. This week, we're going to do like the part 2 to that episode. I have the other half of the mastermind here with me. We're going to talk about a different topic. So if you're like, oh, I already heard this, I don't need to hear it again, do not turn this off. We're talking about something different, okay, and different people. So before we get into the big brave question of the week, let's go ahead and introduce you to who's here. So if you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Sarah. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also a podcast producer and strategic consultant.
Hello. I am Tiffany Joy Arganza, and I am the Kapwa coach. I'm Filipino, and Kapwa means a shared identity, where we believe that when one of us grows, we all grow together. And that's just the heart of my business.
Hi, I'm Ebony Fleming, and I am your Wing Women in the Kitchen, also podcast host of the Thrive Like a Mother podcast.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Jones. I'm the founder of Girls Positivity Club, a nonprofit focused on helping girls feel like they belong and they matter, just simply for being themselves.
Oh, I love this. This is going to be so good. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the big brave question. So this week we're still talking storytelling because I told you all in last week's episode, that's kind of like the premise of the retreat this weekend of this whole mastermind is about amplifying your voice, which telling your story is really a huge part of that. They've all been working on this anthology book all weekend. So storytelling has been a huge part of that. So I want to bring the storytelling back to business. And I want to just pose the question, how does storytelling show up in your business? And does it matter? And if so, why does it matter?
Storytelling is really important in what I do because we build communities for girls. And so it's through our clubs and camps. And so we literally are creating a safe space for them where they can talk and relate. And especially when you are going through something or you want to share a win, we call them yays in Girls Positivity Club. So we always start that way in a circle of yays, and every girl has a voice. And I'm really upfront with them about that when one girl is speaking and holding the mic, that everybody is listening to what she has to say. And if they ever turn and talk or something, I'm like, let's remember that it's important what she's saying, and they tell stories. And so I think stories help us relate to people and find commonalities. And especially in the younger generation, they're looking for that, for someone to help them feel like, me too. Like I had a girl this last week and she shared about, my parents are divorced and I'm going to my dad's this weekend and I'm really going to miss my mom. And that was a real feeling that she had. And even though it wasn't technically a story, it was still her like putting her voice out there. And then other times kids love to tell about their dog or, something that happened at recess or a test that they were nervous about. And even if it's a quick little glimpse into their world, it just helps the other girls see that, like, me too. I have felt afraid to try out for basketball too, or I have felt afraid to raise my hand in class too, or I also won my tournament, or oh, I'm also going to this certain place this weekend, or I've been to that restaurant, or just I think it helps connect people. And that's really important to see yourself in someone else and to know that you're not alone. So for me, that's like one of the big reasons that we tell stories, and especially when you work with kids, like they just want to know that they're not so different and that they can talk about things and not feel like they're the only person on earth.
So I'm the kitchen wing woman, founder of Thrive Empowered. And you would think, okay, what does food have to do with storytelling? And it actually has a lot to do with it, because not only do we all have our own stories, but we all have a food story. Like we all have something throughout our entire lives that has informed the way that we feed ourselves today. And that's not only just physically, but also mentally, spiritually, right? And all of that feeds into also how we build trust within ourselves. And when I think of myself as I've been building this business, I only started to gain more clarity the more trust that I put in myself. And that honestly started for me because I started feeding myself in a way that, okay, I trust that what I'm putting in my body is right. I know where the ingredients come from. I also trust what I'm feeding my family. I know what the ingredients are. And I trust that it is going to be nutritious for me. And when you think of that in the aspect of everything in our lives, not just food, but also what we're listening to, who we're surrounding ourselves around, what we believe in, whatever higher power that is. I personally very much believe in God, but there is this thing where I feel like, how can you trust in God but not trust in yourself, the person that He made? It really goes deeper than the food for me. So I think when people find me, they're like, oh, great recipes. But when you look at it, if you can't trust yourself and food, and one of the most, I don't want to say basic needs of our life, then how are you going to trust yourself in building a business, growing a business, and serving people that are coming to you because they want to gain trust in you?
Okay, that's deep. That literally, I'm so animated, but also I have ADHD. So it took everything in me not to just like add to what you were saying because, wow, first of all, you're amazing. Please receive that. And like, it just shows how we can do so many different things, but still have the same end goal, right? And for me, as a business coach, I've struggled with that. And like I am on my self-discovery, self-acceptance journey. And how storytelling fits in my business is because I named it after me. And when people see that word, Ligaya, I have to literally define it for them and tell them the why. Because I am Tiffany Joy, and Ligaya means joy. And I know that, I know you can't see me right now, but whenever people see me, they're just like, oh, you're like a little bouncing like ball of energy. And I focus so much on joy because you can't have joy without a struggle. I mean, we learned that in Inside Out. As if I didn't know it beforehand, but I'm just saying, like, and as women, we are more than one thing. Like, I am a business owner, I am a mom, I am a wife, I am a daughter, but also in my business, I am a business coach. I do this and that and this and that. We go to these networking events and we're trying to be seen. But sometimes when you just throw so much out there, you feel like that kid in school that's raising their hand with the answers, but the teacher is looking right through them. Mm-hmm. And in my business, I founded the Studio Ligaya, which is a cultural event venue and creative entrepreneur hub, and literally uprooted what my business was before and pivoted because I had to tap into myself, which is how I relate to Ebony in trusting myself. Because working in corporate as an executive assistant in the past, like, I served everybody else. I was the baby of the family, and I was the baby that couldn't be a baby. I had to take care of other people. My grandparents lived with us. Like, we were their caregivers. And my mom was a single mom. And so I felt the weight of the pressure of her having to sacrifice so much. Storytelling is so important. And I coach my clients to use that, because there's literally thousands of people that do what you do, but your story is what makes you special. It's what people are drawn to. It's the magnet that brings the things that you need in your business, in your life to you, versus you saying, like, screaming for attention, which is what I felt like I was doing, being a small Filipino woman in a very masculine corporate world.
This is so interesting. I am so glad you touched on the weight and the pressure, because when you started talking, Tiffany, that is immediately what came up for me. So I want to bookmark that for a second. I'm going to answer the question first, and then I want to come back to the weight and the pressure. So in my business, I'm a podcast producer and strategic consultant, and I think there's a couple of things that come up for me with storytelling. One is the kind of most obvious way with my clients, similar to what you said, Melissa, of helping my clients tell stories in their podcast that they host or as guests on podcasts in an effective way for the listener, but also for their goals, what they're trying to achieve. And so learning to leverage storytelling as a know, like, and trust builder, right? Because you said it forms connections, and so you feel less alone. And I think that's a big part of where I go with the coaching part. The other big place that comes up for me of storytelling in my business is in sales, which is more what you were just talking about of for me, it shows up in the whole sales process, and I also notice it in other people's sales process, for better or for worse, right? And I think there's yes, I want you to feel connected to me. Also, I want to share stories of my clients so you can hear real stories of this is the impact, this is what it's going to look like, this could be you, right? Do you relate to this journey? And if not, maybe you relate to this journey. The more that I share stories of different clients accomplishing different things, the more I'm going to catch you in somebody's story, right? That's definitely a huge part of sales. And related to that, we use stories to, I was going to say tell a story, which is so dumb, but we use stories to put up a certain perception, right? And when we're strategic, right, which kind of, to be a successful business owner, you kind of can get into your strategy brain of making everything strategic. You sort of have to, or else it's not effective, or it's not a good use of your time, or it's a waste of resources, or whatever, right? So we want to learn how to leverage stories in order to put forth a certain perception. And I wanted to ask you what I was thinking already that I wanted to ask you, and now I want to specifically lead you, is I'm curious about what are the danger areas? Like, what do we need to look out for, both in the way we tell stories, but also like recognizing stories that are all around us, especially as business owners, like inundated with advice and coaching and mentorship and all of this and nidus of what everybody else is doing. What are the kind of risk factors? And one of the things that I was thinking, so I'm so glad, Tiffany, your story went there, is the pressure of the perception that we build and then having to like live up to that perception. That's like one thing that came up for me. But anyways, I'm curious, like you can riff about that or whatever other things you think, like what are the
I'm ready.
He's ready.
Pass me the mic. Yeah. So I've coined this phrase for my clients. And before I even start to teach a class, I always tell them to give themselves grace, and there's no wrong moves, only accidental solos. Yes, there's first of all, starting a business is a risk, but like in sharing your stories, you kind of get into this place like you just start sharing stories. For me, I was sharing stories that were sort of framing me as a victim, but like I was more so telling stories about how the world was so mean to me. And I just kept telling that story and then telling another story and just piling that shit up. And then the pressure of making the sale, it's like, love me, love me, love me. Like I always say, and I know that you're a dog person or a dog person. I always say that my dog is the canine version of me because all he does is talk, 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 talk. Love me, love me, love me, hug me, kiss me. That's me. That's all I want. And through this experience, telling the story, getting the reps in creates so much clarity so that you can focus in on the thing that you need to focus on and make the most impact. And I've struggled with this, especially at networking events, because I have like 12 arms and multiple forms of like streams of income. Like I'm a Zumba instructor. I'm a line dance instructor. I'm an event host. I literally own an event venue. I coach leaders and not just business owners, but I lead leaders. And I found storytelling to be so difficult for me because I'm just like, I feel like I'm doing too much just to get attention. But this is before I knew what my actual mission was. And now, even though I am still doing multiple things and giving people the space to shine, I get scared that I can't make a sale because the story wasn't strategic and it was just too wordy and too much and I didn't do this enough and like how I tell my story is how I see myself. It's like it really is a self-reflection, and coming back to the weight and the pressure of it, I felt like I was begging for that sale. I came from a place of scarcity where now I'm in the place where I'm like everything I need literally flows to me. I don't need to beg. People are just like, I want you. I want to work with you. And I had a hard time accepting that because I had a hard time accepting compliments.
So, Tiffany, like the word that came up for me that was just like, oh, for me, it is like storytelling, that risk, it's safety, right?
Mhm.
So for me, I have many, many stories. But what ended up happening for me, and especially as a business owner, is that I would share my stories, but from a different perspective. For me, they were masked. They were like, this is the piece I feel safe enough to share with you. Buy from me because of this piece. And what I found is that, yes, I would get like a few sales, but I wasn't risking someone seeing all of me and accepting that that was enough for them to say, I accept all of you and I really love this piece specifically. I need you to help me in this area. And so what I realized I started doing is I started selling pieces of myself instead of just me. And so walking into this space, I'm no longer leaving that way. Like this retreat has changed me as a business owner because yes, it is a risk to share your stories, but how are people going to trust you to teach them how to trust themselves if you can't share all of who you are and just be okay with not knowing if they're for you or not? Because not everybody is going to be like, yeah, that's my person. And you have to be okay with that risk as a business owner and just as a person on this earth.
I would say for me, it is like what comes up as rejection and how I think we're afraid. I mean, me, and I know it's a universal feeling, is like you're afraid that if you tell your true story, people won't accept it or they'll think, well, big deal. And one time someone commented on a post that I did that I was really proud of. I was highlighting girls and we were doing like our powerful girls stories and it was really fun. And then someone commented, no one cares. And that just felt like pressure and also like, what if they don't care? And what if no one cares about my mission? What if all the what ifs come up? And I think that's such a common feeling is that we all just want to be seen and we all want to see ourselves in other people so that we know that we do belong. And I think those are the type of people that I choose to work with and partner with is like the people who help you feel like they're not above you, or even if they are further ahead than you and they are the expert, it's the type of people who are real and vulnerable and aren't afraid to just be a real person with you. And I think that's the biggest thing too about what I do is I'm teaching the girls that it's okay for not everybody to like you. And that was the hardest thing, and it still is. Me thinking someone's mad at me or I've done something wrong. I have to check in with myself a lot about that because I don't want to hurt anyone and I want to make sure everyone's included. And I want to make sure that when parents look at Girls Positivity Club, like they can see their daughters coming. And also, I know that not everyone is going to, and it's not for everyone, even though I think it is. And I'm trying to figure out a way, like, but at the same time, it's like what they've both said is you have to be true to yourself and also trust that you are attracting the right people. And also that it's okay if, even if someone's in your world and then they leave, it doesn't always mean rejection. It can also mean, this is a huge shift for me, that they got what they needed with you, or that even if it's in friendship and again, these are things that, I think are universal for adults and for kids, is like, there are people you're going to be close with for a season, and that's okay. Or maybe you have a class with them and you're like super close and you connect, and then you both move on and maybe you share stories together and you share a common experience, and it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. A lot of what the girls talk about is they're afraid at times of being their true self or sharing that they disagree with something a friend says, or they have a different opinion about something, or even with any gender. Like, I think it's just a human concern is that if you truly share your full self, will they like me? Will they still want me? And in business, it's like everybody's not for you. And
In life.
in life, yeah. And you telling your story is a way for you to be real, because I think there's so much power in vulnerability and just saying the thing and knowing that it's okay if not everybody feels the exact same way, but that you're telling your truth, and that's the most important thing, no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from, you have a story to tell, and it's powerful and someone needs to hear it.
Mhm.
Even if you don't write it in a book, even if you just share with someone.
That's so interesting. First of all, vulnerability is the exact word that was echoing as I was listening to everybody. Vulnerability, I think, is a huge risk in sharing stories. And one thing that I hear a lot from my clients about podcasting is like, oh, I'm so afraid of the hater, like the comment that you were talking about, Melissa. Like, I'm so afraid of a bad review. I'm so afraid. If I really, like, podcasting feels really vulnerable. If I put my voice out there, and a book is the same way, right? If I put my voice out there in this way, I'm opening myself up to someone rejecting me. And that is so vulnerable. And so a big part of what I do with my clients is work through their preparedness to be vulnerable in that way. But yeah, I think another thing that's really interesting to me, though, is you made the statement, Melissa, and I think I'm going to I agree with so much of what all of you said, but I think I'm going to gently disagree with speaking your truth, or I'm opening the possibility of disagreeing that speaking your truth is the most important thing. That's so interesting to me because I do think, how do I say this? I'm curious about. Is that coming from a place of privilege? Because when we're desperate to make sales, it's not just because we don't want to be rejected. The rejection wound is a big deal, right? But it's not just that. It's also like I have to put food on the table. And so I want to just be totally freaking clear. When I started my business 6.5 years ago now, I was the primary earner for my family. My husband was in grad school working part-time at a movie theater. I had just been laid off from my job. We had 3 kids at home, and it was a month before Christmas. So I need to make a sale was not me having a mindset thing I needed to overcome. No, I really actually just needed to make some fucking money. I'm just going to be real. And I think that, and I'm not trying to tell my story as a sob story. Actually, I'm very, very, very privileged and blessed of the amount of comfort and safety I have had psychologically and physically my whole life. Financially, it's gotten dicey at times, but my psychological and physical well-being has been safe most of the days of my life. I'm very, very blessed and privileged to say that. So I'm not trying to say look, here's my sob story. I'm trying to say there are people with stories much more vulnerable than that who tell I'm curious if speaking their truth really is the most important thing. And another thing that's coming up for me that I feel is related, but I'm really curious to hear what you all have to say of this, is the idea that on Instagram, and I think now also on TikTok and maybe even X and obviously Facebook, but that's still Meta, it's literally called stories that pop up for 24 hours and you show a very small glimpse of this is just a story, right? And kind of especially for business, but even if you're not a business owner, how we show up on stories is a thing that we really are strategic about of what part of ourselves we are presenting to the world. And it does matter. So anyway, that's coming up for me in this discussion. I don't know what made me even think of that. I'm just, I guess, hearing the word story over and over, made me think of that. But yeah, I'm curious what's coming up for you guys as I say this.
I mean,
I didn't want to be misunderstood, especially of thinking you should be who you're not.
Yes.
Or you have to share every part of your life to every person, because I think there are some things that are private, and you don't have to share your entire life with everybody. You deserve to have some privacy and your own thoughts.
Yeah.
But I think there's also, when you do share, there's connection. And I think that's very important, especially when you are buying from someone, and also just showing up authentically about what you offer. And I have been there too with the finances. Like, there are times where you do have to, and it's like, what is wrong that it's not happening? Or why does this feel so hard when I feel like I'm doing the right thing, or I'm trying to reach the people that I'm supposed to reach? And this is it just feels hard sometimes.
Oh, what just came up for me? Those are all also stories.
Yeah.
What success should look like, why it doesn't look like it, what's wrong with me that I didn't. These are all also ways stories show up in our businesses.
I literally that came into my brain when Melissa said being true to yourself, because we live in an age of social media where there's so much noise. Who you should be as a business owner, what your title should be, what business activities you should be doing. Think of it in the aspect of home, what you should be feeding your family or your kids or yourself. There's so much noise. And I think, like what Melissa is trying to say, is just keep tapped in with yourself. Because you have to, it's great sometimes to allow feedback in, but allow that feedback in through your filter and say, okay, what parts of that is me and what parts are not me? Yeah.
What came up for me was the whole performance thing and showing up authentically. And my coach coached me to use stories to make the sale, because that's how you get the most connection. But I'm an in-person person. I like to have real conversations and know at the core that our energies vibe. And just like you said before, in this space, you are coming to my dinner table. When people come into my event venue, I'm opening up my space and my home and my family to you. And sometimes in the times of scarcity, I'm just I found myself begging, but I found that with the storytelling, sharing the delivery, that's where I was going. Worse, I feel like social media is the bane of my fucking existence, because I am so worried about it not showing up perfectly. I'm so worried about how I'm going to look. I'm so worried about what message I'm delivering. Did I say that right? But did I answer the question? Did I what was I wearing? And then squirrel. That's just me. And what this container, the Ascension Mastermind, brought to light was that the reason why I have thousands of people following me is me. Raw, real, just as I am, unfiltered, but even in that way, people see the power in that. Yeah.
Okay, this is fascinating too. And I feel like we kind of have to wrap, which is unfortunate because I feel like we could really keep digging.
Yeah.
But I have always heard this kind of thought exercise that is, are you who you think you are? Or are you how other people perceive you and are affected by you? And I think that this could kind of carry into this conversation in a lot of ways. But one of the ways that's was really, I guess, permeating through my brain while you were talking, Ebony, is, am I the story I'm telling myself about who I am, and then how those other stories sometimes come into affecting that, and having to really stay true to the story that I want to be true about myself is the one that I have to hold on to, not these other things that these lies that I can start telling myself. Because if I believe them and who I am, this is really meta, sorry, I'm like going there. But if I am who I believe myself to be, if that's how me is defined, is who I believe myself to be, then if I let myself believe these other stories that like tear me down, then does that become true? And so believing the story about myself that I want to be true, and then trying to tell that story to other people and looking for the validation, you see that this is the version of me that's true, right? Like, you see this version of me that's true, right? And if somebody says no one cares, then that story that you're trying to freeze out, that you're like, no, I'm trying really hard not to believe that. And somebody like bounces that back at you. It's like a test of your resilience of like, how well have I frozen that out? So yeah, anyway, I thank you all for getting like raw and vulnerable with me. I know that's kind of been the theme of this weekend. Y'all have been like excavating a lot of things. And so this has been another conversation of doing that. But thank you so much for being here. And to you listening, thank you so much for being here. I hope this opens some cans of worms for you. And if you are really curious about connecting with any of these women, including myself, which I know you are, their bios and all the ways to connect with them and to support the work that they do or to learn more about how they can support you is all linked in the show notes/description of the episode. And thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.
If you love this podcast and you've been kicking around the idea of starting your own, you have got to come join us for Podcast Launch Prep Week, coming up February 23rd to 27th. Join me, Sarah, Jackie, and Katie from Podfox Media for 5 days of hands-on workshops, panel Q&As, and even hot seat coaching. You'll leave with a 6-month episode calendar already planned out, a launch strategy, and so much more. At Podfox, we've produced over 5,000 episodes, consulted on hundreds of globally ranked shows, and helped dozens of podcasters start at zero and climb the charts. We know what it takes to leverage a podcast for your business goals. Learn more and register now at podfoxmedia.com.